So a recent survey of North American and European tourists found there is a growing interest in Indigenous-led tourism. The problem is, how do you draw the line between educational and exploitative experiences?
What do you think, Riley?
I think that, first of all, I love this idea that Indigenous communities are able to make money and to grow economies through things like tourism. Because I think so often Indigenous people are really told, especially by people like the government and by industry, that like resource extraction is the only thing that they get their money from, right? And like going into these land claim deals and doing all of these things. And so Indigenous by and led ways is great. And there's nobody I trust more to actually do this in a good way and to take care of the land and like not, you know, ruin it in the process of doing this. The thing, though, that I worry about is that when I was reading up about this, I know people were saying that they want a culturally authentic experience. But that also relies on their assumptions of what is authentic in your eyes. Is it this, like, romanticized, exoticized version of who Indigenous people are, these like spiritual of the earth people, is so much of, I think, the narratives that we have around Indigenous people. And at what point are you not asking for education, but you're asking for a performance from these people? And that is like, can get into really icky territory.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I guess for me, in line with what I was saying about raising my daughter, it's also about, to me, there is no equality without economic equality and sovereignty. And I think for me, the line of exploitative versus an authentic experience is who's running the show? I mean, is it an Indigenous person led by the community? Is it supporting the community? And again, last year, I was seeking this out very, very much. And there's a beautiful community just outside of Quebec City called Wendake. It's the Huron-Wendat peoples. And they have this 5-star resort. It's called the Musée des Premières Nations. And you have an entire facility that is stunning. It is owned and run and supports the community. And so when I think authentic, I am a guest and they welcome you and I'm there to learn. And I also know that the food that I'm eating is being prepared by an Indigenous chef. I know that the cultural experiences that we're doing in the Longhouse, for example, the teacher who's sitting there around the fire is a person of the community. So for me, it takes a little bit of extra work if you want to do the right thing. But is it worth it? I want my money to speak and support the people who I want to support, not the Disneyfied version of what an Indigenous cultural experience looks like. And I want the money to go where I want it to go, which is in the community. So yes, do the work. Just do a little bit of research.
That looks incredible, but I don't think that's going to be accessible for lots of people. I'm going to guess that was several $100s at least per person per night, which is amazing if you can do that. But
people are spending that anyway, Cynthia.
I don't know.
They're spending it anyway.
I don't know. I think a lot of people are struggling right now financially.
No, you're right. But I think what I'm saying is people who want to travel and want to do sustainable educational travel, you know, people who are struggling. And by the way, there's a ton of stuff even just here in Ontario. You can spend $60 and have a fully Indigenous-led experience. Like, you don't have to break the bank. But if you want to support the community, you've got a little bit of extra money, you want to do something with the family, we're not talking a trip to Europe. It's not as expensive as you might think. I mean, for me, if there's people like me who are like, we want to do right, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
I keep thinking about the states and how I think it was just a couple of days ago that the federal government announced that they will co-manage Bears Ears National Park, which is 1.3 million acres, a place I've always wanted to go. And they're going to co-run it now with the original inhabitants, 5 Indigenous tribes who've lived there much longer than it has been a park. And I just thought that was such a beautiful idea. One of the spokespeople said, this just makes that's my words. This just makes so much sense. The person much smarter than I am said, today, instead of being removed from a landscape to make way for a public park, we are being invited back to our ancestral homelands to help repair them. And National Parks Canada, they do have Indigenous partners. I saw on the website there's 4 sort of tours that you can take into lesser known parks. But that just immediately, our Canada parks bring in so much money, so much tourism. What a perfect natural way to get people to make money for Indigenous people, because there's a lot of money to be made, but also to educate. And it's, I don't know, maybe I'm being nostalgic and overly emotional about the Canadian landscape, but there's just something that just seems to make sense.
Yeah, I love that idea. I mean, I haven't been able to think about travel much. I still have so much post-COVID anxiety. And but the last trip I took, and I'm curious to know your thoughts about this. I went to Calgary, and it was my friend Jan Arden. It was her birthday, and all she wanted to do was to go to a casino. So we went to, and I'm going to get the Grey Eagle Resort and Casino, and it's Indigenous owned and run. And obviously, this is one of those things where, I don't think this, when we're talking about going and learning, I don't think this is anything to learn. This is not. But is this still a good gesture? Like, is this I'm struggling with asking this in a way that isn't crass.
No, I think that's good. And good to distinct that it's like, yeah, going to the Indigenous casino is not, a
cultural
expanding
experience.
your cultural knowledge of Indigenous people. But what it is doing is like what we were talking about, of taking money that you would spend in other places and putting it instead into the hands of Indigenous communities, Indigenous people. And like, people ask me all the time, like, if that's the appropriate thing to do for even things like earrings. Like, they're like, can I buy beaded earrings and doing whatever? I'm like, yes, in fact, like, Indigenous creators want and need you to be able to make a livelihood. And so, like, it's as long as you're not profiting off of this experience, as long as, like, you don't take it and try and then sell, like, oh yeah, I had this great cultural experience, let me tell you all about it at the casino. I just think that's actually a really, like, actionable thing to be doing. It's way, maybe makes a bigger difference in some ways than just reading a book about Indigenous people, but actually putting money into their hands.
Can I add a wrinkle to that, though? Because I am a casino lover, and I'll do a casino wherever. But being from BC, we do also have a lot of casinos there. And the thing is that I do think that there are layers. Like, as Mel said, the experience should evolve. So I 100% support the fact that on these casinos, the money goes back to the communities, and yet the casino experience in and of itself is excess. There's buffet at casinos. There is waste produced at casinos. So when we're thinking more and more now about cultural experiences that benefit communities and how to do it sustainably, there will be trips that you only tick one box, but you may not be able to tick both, but both should, especially as we're beginning to understand the Indigenous experience is to respect the land, not to be wasteful of the land. So it's a little bit like, I did think about my casino experiences after our meeting today, and then I wondered, but at the casino, I'm seeing people, even at the Indigenous casino, fill up their plates 5 times, like at the buffet. Like, a casino comes with a buffet.
But I guess don't let perfectionism get in the way of progress.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
I don't think. I think if you're trying and your head's in the right space. And also, like, what do you get out of it? Like, what do you get out of it? Is it that you just want to sit there and, like, be entertained? And maybe entertainment's a small part of it, but are you feeling educated? Are you walking away, hopefully, wiser and smarter, and to do your life differently? I don't know. Of course, I struggle with that, because there's always that play between making money and learning and
having a vacation.
and having a vacation. And, like, there's a lot, but at the same time, like you said, I don't want my perfectionism about how to be the perfect ally to get in the way of actually getting off my butt and doing something, just something.
Yeah. I think that's like a really excellent point too. You're bringing up about a conversation in Indigenous communities is just because we want, economic sovereignty for people, and we want Indigenous people to be able to sustain themselves through their own businesses, their own economies, doesn't mean we're also exempt from, the impact that running businesses can have. So things like, there are people who talk about Indigenous people should be able to do with their land what they want, including resource development, if that's the case. Sure, yes, absolutely. But then that also still contributes to climate change, where Indigenous people in other parts of the world are going to suffer because of those decisions. So it doesn't exempt you from that just because it's also part of this conversation. So I think you're right that there is, like, wrinkles and imperfections and balances that we do have to pay attention to in all of it.
Yeah. Keep that food for thought as you're planning maybe some summer road trips or whatnot. Riley, what an absolute pleasure to have you with us today and joining this conversation. Thanks for being here in person, finally in person.
Thanks for having me. It was lovely.
Thank you.